place yourself entirely in their hands, Mr. Bonsai. Rule number 1 is, don't do anything for yourself that others can do for you. Oh dear, I'm terribly sorry. The Vauxhall Omega, it's probably one of the last great mass market badge saloons to be sold in the UK. But is it any good? Should you care? Why, let's find out, shall we? Vauxhall, proceed.
From time to time we wouldn't lie. And here we are, we'll never be the same, and on the screens of our lives flash words of good songs that we've not yet sung. And we're not worried about the future, and we're not guilty about the past. We're pressing on together into joy that we're loud.
So welcome once again to another episode of Tweed Jacket Reviews, and today we're in the Coventry area. We're once again being looked after by Mr. James Coleman, a rubbish mechanic, who has his own channel on YouTube, and this is his 1999 Vauxhall Omega 2.5 CDX manual. Before we get into detail about the Vauxhall Omega, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, to like this video and to leave a comment below. It really helps us to be able to get these episodes out faster. I'd also like to say thank you to Mr. Coleman for the loan of his car. Thanks, James. Thames. So the Vauxhall Omega, or the Opel Omega B as it's sometimes known, was introduced in 1994. It replaced a long line of big Vauxhall saloons, and in this country anyway, it replaced the Vauxhall Carlton. The Vauxhall Senator was another much beloved car that it replaced, and like the Senator, the Omega became the vehicle of choice for the police. And driving this along these roads on the outskirts of Coventry, it really feels like I'm in an episode of Thief Takers, and I'm taking some detectives to deter some terrorists from stealing diamonds. The engines available in the Vauxhall Omega were a 2-litre engine, the 8-valve version of which had 115 horsepower, and the 16-valve version of which had 135 horsepower. There are also some V6 options like this one. This is a 2.5 with 170 horsepower. There was also a 3-litre V6 which had 205 horsepower. Then when the facelift came in 1999, there were some different engines after the first year or so. There was a 2.2 litre engine, it was a 4-cylinder, that had 145 horsepower. Then there was the 2.6, that went up to 180. And then top of the range was the 3.2, which had 215 horsepower. Now that's very good for catching criminals, isn't it? The trim options available in the Omega were two very basic cars. They were called the Edition S and the Select. I wouldn't recommend going for one of those, to be honest. Then we had GLS, lots of those were with the 2-litre engines. Then CD and CDX, like this one. At the top of the range there were two kind of sort of flagship models. One was more sporty, that's the MV6, that came in 1998. And then there's also the Elite. This car actually has a black interior from an MV6 Omega. It was originally beige, it had cloth seats. Obviously the leathers are one you want to go for if you can possibly get one. Omegas were available as a saloon like this one, or an estate. And I gather that Alex Kirsten from Car Throttle has just bought himself the wrong car because he's bought a facelifted 2.2 litre automatic estate. If you're a connoisseur of Omegas, that's not the sort of one you want to go for. As I've mentioned, there was a facelift for the Omega in 99. The car looked quite different actually after that. Those cars come with more problematic engines. The 2.2 litre in particular is not the best engine. Obviously there were some diesels as well throughout the Omega's production life, but as usual we don't talk about those, do we?
No.
One of the things you'll notice about driving an Omega is the car looks quite generic in the sort of mid-90s way. They were also sold in the States as a Cadillac Caterer, and in Australia as the Holden Commodore, and all kinds of variations of that name. Short ones, long ones, fast ones, slow ones. But to drive this car feels far more like something like a BMW 5 Series. Obviously I have driven a 5 Series on this channel and I did like it, but the Omega is a very underrated car indeed. A lot of people just would not even notice these when they're driving down the road, and obviously that's a good thing if you're an undercover police officer, because you can go around very stealthily, but it doesn't have the same kind of cachet, I suppose, as a BMW. But the engineering in here is remarkable. We've got rear wheel drive, we've got this Getrag 5-speed gearbox that also is used in BMWs. The car has a lovely engine. I mean, you know, you'll see that on some of the external shots. This is a fantastic General Motors V6 engine. It's when they were putting things together really, really well. The car's very responsive and very torquey. It's also very easy to drive thanks to this amazing visibility that the car has. No need for a camera or parking sensors or anything like that. And the seats are very comfortable too, which helps, particularly this leather seat that Mr. Coleman found when he bought this car about 6 months or so ago. Going through these bends as well, the steering is nice and positive, plenty of feel. I don't think it's electrically assisted, I think it's hydraulic system, which is fantastic, and I'm having a brilliant time. One of the things to bear in mind when you're buying your Omega, and you know, I would recommend you go for a V6 one, either the 2.5 or the 3 litre would be best, is that most of them were automatics. The manual ones were very, very rare because they weren't actually standard. You had to actually order this from the factory, and this particular car was owned by the same family from new before Mr. Coleman picked it up, and they specifically ordered a manual gearbox. The Getrag unit is quite a long throw on this, but it's very, very, very nice to use, and I think this could take a lot of power. In fact, they were going to make a V8 version of the Omega originally, but they cancelled a project for, I don't know, reasons. So it would have been nice to have seen that, but if you really wanted to get your hands on a car like this with a V8 engine, in this sort of late 90s, early 2000s, you could get your hands on the Holden HSE, which was basically one of these with the V8 engine, and that was crazy. Absolutely crazy. The Vauxhall Monaro that they sold a little bit later on, which again was a rebadged Holden from Australia, that was the same platform as this. They do kind of look similar, but that had just ludicrously powerful engines, and if you want to be as sporty as possible, then that might be the option for you. However, I am wearing a tweed jacket tonight, so I think we're going to stick with the V6 versions. So now we're well outside the city limits of Coventry, and we're on the country roads of Warwickshire. How does this feel in terms of the ride and handling? The ride's surprisingly good. I can't really believe that the car corners as well as it does, and yet it rides really well. I can see why, if you were a police officer and you wanted to do a very long shift in a car and you were driving hundreds of miles a day, this would be a fantastic place to spend time. The driving position's really good. The steering wheel is quite big, that's just something to bear in mind. But the steering's very responsive. The ride is, yeah, it's not Rolls-Royce smooth or anything, but it's much better than a lot of cars that I've actually driven that are much more modern than this. Let's go into this bend. Third gear, about 40 miles per hour. There's no trouble whatsoever. You can feel the car through the wheel nice and easily. Switch up into fifth. We're pootling along to 2,000 RPM. It's no bother. It's a car that can do virtually anything. You can cruise on the motorway in this car. It will handle a country road very well. You can put the family in it, particularly the estate. You can be an undercover detective, do whatever you want. one of the things about an Omega is that they're very cheap. As we might have seen on the Car Throttle channel, theirs costs them about £500, but it's not a very good one. But they are out there for that sort of money. This one's a little bit more. I'd say you'd be spending, say, £1,000 to £2,000 to get a car that's in this kind of condition. This is in very, very nice condition. It's only done 87,000 miles. We will have a little section later on where Mr. Coleman will be speaking about what it is like to own an Omega, because after all he is a mechanic and he's not actually a rubbish mechanic, although he is the rubbish mechanic, if that makes sense. So he will be talking about the practicalities of what you need to look out for when you're buying one of these cars. But from the point of view of what I can see, this is a specialist owned car. It's been very well looked after, and they're not that difficult to work on in comparison with anything. I mean, an Alpha 166, which is one of Mr. Coleman's other cars, is a much more complicated thing to use. In fact, this car is used on a daily basis. It's used to get to work and things like that, and to do motorway journeys, and it's absolutely perfect for that. In terms of fuel economy, with this 2.5 litre V6, maybe about mid-20s, 26, 27 miles per gallon. Better than the Volvo 960 that some of you would have seen on the channel last year, which for a big old car that's over 20 years old and has this degree of performance in 0 to 60, I think it's about 8.5 seconds in an unmodified car like this. That's pretty good. With the manual gearbox, you do get probably a bit better economy than you would with an automatic. And yes, the ultimate in discretion and taste. The only thing really wrong with this car, as people would have said in contemporary reviews, is the badge. It just doesn't seem on the outside to many people to be very exciting, but those in the know, those are the ones who are benefiting from everyone else's ignorance. In terms of equipment, this CDX model has a CD changer, a nice cassette player here. We've got dual zone climate control, variable speed intermittent wipe, 4 electric windows, electric mirrors, electric sunroof. Also, this has got a leather interior from an MV6 model, albeit that's not standard. A CDX back in 1999 would have come with a cloth interior. We've got a 5-speed manual gearbox that is here. We've also got Traffic Master, which is something that I used to have on an old Road 45. It wasn't very good when I had it in 2009. It's certainly not very good now. So, you know, don't buy a car for that. As I was saying about Traffic Master, when I had my Road 45, and that's a 2004 model, I bought that in 2009, and it did sort of work at the time. But if I pressed a button now, let's just see what happens.
Traffic Master, license expired. Telephone 0990561712.
I don't think I'm going to be dialing that number, because I don't think that exists either. So that is the most useless piece of equipment that I've ever seen fitted to a car in a long time. As you can see, the weather's somewhat changed from when we started on our test drive earlier on today, so we're going to have to improvise a bit, and we've just parked up here outside Mr. Coleman's residence. So if this bit of a review looks a bit different from usual, then I do apologise. But anyway, that was a really good fun drive. This is a fantastic car. I can see why Mr. Coleman loves it. But we're going to look at now at the more practical side of the Vauxhall Omega, and we're going to have a look in the boot. I'll find my umbrella first. So if I walk round to the boot, there's actually the badge on this car, which is the same as the boot release, which is good. Open that up. Now, very unusually in this type of car, you don't lift the boot carpet up to access anything like a spare wheel. The spare wheel is actually here. And also there is a disc changer. I've done some shots already of what the boot actually looks like without the stuff in it, but just for your information, this is a huge space. and you can actually fold the seats. I think I don't know where the levers are. I might say something different actually a bit later, but the seats I think do fold, and you can get a lot of stuff in here. Traffic cones, I don't know, signs, first aid kits, whatever you want to do if you're obviously working at a police force. But this is a remarkably spacious car, especially for the era of it. I'm very impressed. Despite me almost clucking my head on the door there, it is easy to get into the front of an Omega. And actually when you're in here, it's a nice place to be. Now some of these plastics don't feel particularly nice, but bear in mind this is quite an old car. It's 21 years old, and so you can forgive it really. These controls, once you get used to them, are pretty easy. Now the post-facelift cars do have a different interior. This entire central section is completely different. But the pre-facelift cars, it's pretty easy to understand once you get your head around the fact that all these buttons here are very, very, very similar in terms of their shape and size. The stereo, I'm sure you could change that for a different one if you wanted to, because it's a standard DIN unit size. One of the funny things about these cars is that if I just turn the ignition on here, the sat-nav unit that came with a pre-facelift Omega was down in this tiny little area here, and it was a black and white unit. It wasn't a colour screen until the post-facelift models, which had been sort of up here. Interesting that, isn't it? Because this is a CDX, we've got heated seats. We've got dual zone climate control as well. We've got a CD changer in the boot. I can't actually find that, so you'll just have to believe me, it's actually there. And we've got 4 electric windows as well, although interestingly they're not on the doors, they're in the centre here, which presumably makes it easier for it to go from left to right hand drive. Standard handbrake, of course, little cubby hole for putting things in there, presumably cassettes. It would have been in 99, and you know, the CDs won't fit in there, I don't think. Nice sort of wood trim, obviously not real wood or anything like that, but a lot of cars at this era had this sort of wood trim. I like Rovers, so I'm at home in that respect. I like this colour as well. It would have been nice to have a beige leather interior, but Mr. Coleman likes the black, and that's absolutely fine. The switches for the headlights and things like that. This is a standard Vauxhall unit that's been around for donkey's years. I remember this from the first generation Vauxhall Corsa, for example. Also, we've got these stalks again. They feel like they're out of a Mark III Cavalier, which they probably are, to be honest. Also, this car's got cruise control, which is brilliant. That works quite well, although it's quite an early system and there's no sort of resume function or anything like that, I don't think. It's actually got steering wheel controls as well, which if for a car of the 1990s is pretty good. Not all cars had that, and this is a leather wrapped one too. The visibility inside an Omega is actually really, really good. There's lots of light. We've got an electric sunroof in this car. That helps get a bit more light in. I can see really what's in front, although the bonnet slopes away quite severely, so just watch that when you're parking. To the back, it's pretty good. There's no rear wiper on the saloons. Obviously, most saloon cars don't have one. If you had an estate, you would get one, but it's quite a big glass area, so you can see very well for a saloon, particularly one that's this large, and so you shouldn't have too many problems parking. If you really want to, you could put a spoiler on top of there, and that would help you a bit. The feel of the plastics, well, that's soft touch at the top, which is good. That's a bit hard on there, but we have leather on top of the doors. Now this release here feels a little bit on the cheap side, but it's not too bad. As you can see, we've got a comprehensive instrument cluster here as well. Now the dials in this car are the clearest I've ever seen in any car. You look how easily they are marked, and obviously if you are wanting to pull someone over, you can check your speed nice and accurately to make sure they're not exceeding 30 miles an hour, because that is marked just there. I didn't bring my secret measurements documents with me today. The storm has jogged my memory too much, and so they're not here, but if I open that up, that's nice and large. The documents would easily go in there. There's a cutaway for you to see that as well. The door pockets though are a little bit on the small side. You can just about fit a 500ml bottle of water in the side if you really jam it in. Apart from that, there's no cup holders in there at all. As I said, this centre armrest isn't particularly big. Maybe get some cassettes in there. So it's not the most commodious car in terms of keeping odds and ends in, but it's all right. Right then. What do I think of the Vauxhall Omega? Well, This is one of the most underrated cars of the 1990s. Values at the moment are still quite low on them, and so if you do want one, I would recommend getting one as quickly as you can, really, because numbers are going down quite fast. Overall, I love it. Oh, dear me, I'm terribly sorry. The firing power inside my crater is enough to annihilate a small army. You can watch it all on TV. It's the last programme that you ever likely to see.
Well, welcome to my Vauxhall Omega. I've owned it now just over 6 months. Been after one for a long time, particularly one with a manual gearbox. They are getting few and far between. They weren't very popular when they were new. Yeah, they're just a cool car to own, easy to work on, cheap to fix, so long as you keep your eye on the cam belt and the rust, particularly on the V6 engine ones. You'll have a car that'll last you a long time, particularly an early one like this. And yeah, very good car. Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching this episode of Tweed Jacket Reviews. My name is Joseph Lloyd. I'm an independent vehicle consultant. I find cars for people. Please subscribe to the channel if you'd like to do that. Don't forget to like this video and to leave a comment below. If you wish me to source a car for you, I'd love to do that. My website is www.lloydvehicleconsulting.co.uk. Please use the contact me page on my website to get in touch. I've got a Facebook page as well. It's facebook.com/Lloyd Vehicle Consulting. Thank you.